The days of peace flowed gently in the little house on the edge of the city. Rocky had healed his dark eyes, no longer holding the wild fear they once carried. Now they softened in the warmth of love, and even shone with quiet joy when the girl tangled her small hands in his fur. By day he ran after a ball across the yard, her laughter ringing clear in the summer air. By evening he stretched out on the porch, bathed in the glow of the setting sun. For the first time Rocky lived not as a stray, but as a member of a family. Yet peace was as fragile as morning mist. On silent nights under the pale wash of moonlight, Rocky would rise suddenly, ears pricking, gaze locked on the distant ridges. From far across the mountains came the sound of howls, long, hollow, and cold, the call of wolves. Each time it reached him, his hackles lifted, and deep inside his chest something stirred, half fear, half longing. He would stand on the porch for long minutes, torn between the warmth at his back and the wilderness that still beckoned. Then, on a sweltering summer afternoon, disaster came. The air was heavy, unmoving, as Rocky dozed in the shade of a tree. Suddenly his nose caught a scent sharp and bitter. Smoke. He jerked up, growl rising low in his throat, eyes snapping toward the neighbor's house. In moments, flames were racing up a pile of firewood stacked against the fence. The blaze licked at dry planks, crackling as it climbed higher, heat swelling like a storm of fire. Rocky bolted across the yard, barking in sharp, urgent bursts. His cries echoed down the narrow street. He clawed the dirt, whirling in circles, then charged toward the door. The girl appeared, eyes wide. "Buddy, what's wrong?" she gasped. But Rocky seized her sleeve in his teeth, tugging hard toward the gate. She froze, then lifted her eyes. Smoke billowed above the rooftops, and the orange glow of fire flickered against the sky. Rocky pulled again, barking furiously. This time she understood. He was telling her to run. Neighbors spilled from their houses, shouting, "Fire, get water, quick!" Buckets sloshed, footsteps pounded, but the flames spread faster than hands could fight them. Rocky drove the girl toward the street, his body pressed against her legs, his bark cutting through the chaos. She stumbled, clutching his fur, tears streaking her soot-stained cheeks. "Don't leave me, buddy. Please don't leave me." Rocky turned his head, let out a single low bark, steady, certain like a promise. Then he froze. Through the choking haze, his sharp eyes caught a terrible sight. In the corner of the neighbor's yard, a small wooden doghouse blazed, flames devouring its walls. From inside came the thin, desperate cry of a newborn pup. The girl screamed, "There's a puppy in there." Without a moment's hesitation, Rocky lunged back into the inferno. Heat slammed into him, smoke burned his eyes, sparks hissed against his fur. He rammed his shoulder into the door, tearing at the wood with his teeth until it splintered. The fire roared, scorching his coat, but he forced his way inside. When he emerged, his jaws held a trembling body no bigger than his paw. The pup whimpered weakly, its fur still soft with birth. Gasps and cries erupted from the neighbors. That dog. He went into the fire. Rocky stumbled out of the smoke and laid the tiny creature gently at the girl's feet. She fell to her knees, clutching it to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "It's safe now," she whispered through sobs. "But he saved you." Rocky collapsed onto the dirt, his chest heaving, patches of fur blackened by flame. His eyes stung with smoke, his body quivered with exhaustion. Yet when he looked up and saw the girl holding the pup close, a flicker of relief glimmered in his gaze. His tail thumped once, weak but steady, against the ground. The fire was finally out. Water streamed across the blackened ground, leaving behind charred fences and the acrid stench of smoke. Neighbors stood shaken but grateful, their eyes drawn again and again to the dark-furred dog who had braved the flames. Rocky, once a wanderer, had risked everything to save not only a child but a helpless newborn pup. The girl's mother knelt beside him, her hands trembling as they touched his singed fur. "You brave soul," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved us again." The girl clutched the tiny puppy against her chest, her face streaked with soot and tears. "Please, Mom, can we keep it? It doesn't have parents anymore." The woman looked from her daughter's tearful eyes to Rocky, who lay panting, his tail tapping faintly against the dirt. Slowly she nodded. "This house has room for one more." That night the house was filled with both relief and quiet sorrow. On the porch, Rocky lay stretched out, his body weary, while the girl sat beside him with the pup curled in her arms. She stroked them both with her small hands, whispering softly, "Now we're a family, all of us." Rocky's eyes drifted shut. For a fleeting moment, the hunger, the loneliness, the storms of his wandering life seemed to vanish. For the first time, he felt the world had returned what it once stole from him. Not just shelter, not just survival, but love. Yet as the days passed, something stirred within him. Each time he saw the little pup whimpering in search of a mother it would never know, memories rose like ghosts. He remembered the night he too was abandoned, trembling in the cold forest, desperate for warmth that never came. The pup was a mirror reflecting the emptiness that still lived in him. The girl noticed the change. Rocky no longer played as eagerly. He spent long hours at the edge of the yard, ears twitching at distant sounds, eyes fixed on the horizon. At night, instead of curling beside the door, he stood for hours on the porch, gazing at the ridges far beyond. One evening, the girl pressed her cheek into his fur, her voice small and trembling. "Buddy, are you sad? Do you miss home?" Rocky leaned into her touch, his tail swaying faintly, but his eyes glimmered with a faraway light she could not reach. Then came the morning. The valley lay wrapped in mist, the air cool and still. The girl slept soundly, the puppy pressed against her chest when Rocky rose. He padded softly into her room, lowered his head and brushed his nose against her cheek. She stirred, half awake. "Buddy," she murmured. Rocky licked her face gently, a farewell pressed into her skin. Then he stepped back, gave a soft bark, low, tender, almost human in its sorrow. By the time she sat up, Rocky was already at the gate. His paws struck the damp earth, his body dissolving into the fog. "Buddy," she cried, running barefoot to the porch, clutching the puppy tight. Her voice cracked with desperation. "Don't go. You'll come back, right?" Rocky stopped. He turned his head, and across the haze their eyes met. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. Then his tail swayed once, slow and solemn, as if to say, "I will always remember you." And then he was gone. His black form melted into the white curtain of mist paws, carrying him back toward the mountains. The girl collapsed to her knees, tears streaming, whispering through the sobs, "Come back to me." But Rocky did not look back again. His heart was heavy with parting, but steady with resolve. The sight of the orphaned pup had rekindled his purpose. Somewhere beyond the valleys and rivers, beyond forests and stone ridges, his parents, or at least the truth of them, still waited. As the sun broke over the mountains, casting golden light across the misty road, Rocky moved with quiet strength. His body bore the scars of fire, of battle, of hunger. But within his eyes a brighter fire burned. He was no longer just a stray, no longer only a savior, no longer simply a friend. He was a wanderer with a mission, and his journey had only just begun. The mountains faded behind him, their dark ridges swallowed by the horizon. For days, Rocky wandered, his paws raw from stone and dirt, his body lean, his heart pulled forward by an invisible thread. Then at last the forest broke open. A city. It pulsed with light and noise. Cars roared like beasts of steel horns, stabbing the air. Towers of glass clawed at the sky, their walls blazing with the last fire of the sun. Streetlights blinked awake one by one, painting the world in amber and silver. Crowds surged across sidewalks like rivers, voices tangled with the hum of machines, the rattle of carts, the laughter spilling from neon bars. Rocky froze at the edge of it all. His tail sank low, ears twitching, nose flaring at the storm of smells, gasoline smoke, roasted meat, trash, perfume. It was too much, too fast. Yet still he stepped forward. The pavement was hot beneath his paws, slick with oil. People glanced down and frowned, but hurried on. A boy tugged his mother's sleeve, pointing, "Look, Mom, a dog!" She pulled him away without a second glance. A man in a suit tossed a crust of bread near the curb. Rocky sniffed it, then turned away. Hunger gnawed at him, but unease pressed harder. He wandered deeper. Wide streets narrowed into alleys where trash bins overflowed and walls leaned damp and stained. Here the roar of the city dimmed, replaced by whispers. Two young men lingered in the shadows. Their hands trembled as one unwrapped a folded packet. White powder gleamed under the faint glow of a street lamp. "Quick before anyone sees," one muttered. The other laughed, sharp and hollow. "Relax. This is the good stuff. One more hit and we're set." Rocky crouched low, watching. He didn't understand, but the smell made his stomach twist, bitter, unnatural, burning his nose. Then the night split open. Police hands where we can see them. Heavy boots thundered down the alley. Flashlights sliced the dark. The men cursed, bolting the packet, tumbling to the ground. White dust scattered across the pavement as officers surged after them, their shouts fading into the roar of the city. Silence fell. Only the dust remained. Rocky edged forward, sniffing. The powder stung like fire. He sneezed, pulled back, then leaned in again. One breath too deep, and the world tilted. His legs buckled. The walls swayed, lights smearing into streaks. His chest hammered, breath caught vision, collapsing into a tunnel. A low whine slipped from his throat. He stumbled, then fell. The last thing he saw was a beam of light sweeping the alley, boots rushing closer, and a voice startled but gentle. "Easy, boy. I've got you." He woke to warmth, a blanket beneath him, the sterile tang of antiseptic in the air, white walls, a desk stacked with papers, a lamp burning steady. Rocky tried to lift his head, but his ribs ached, his paws twitched. A man in uniform sat beside him, calm-eyed and steady. His voice softened when Rocky stirred. "You're awake. Tough dog. You almost didn't make it." Rocky blinked, chest heaving. The man poured water into a bowl and slid it close. "Go on. Drink." Slowly, Rocky leaned forward, lapping at the cool water. Each swallow steadied him. The man sighed. "You inhaled cocaine. Shocked your system. If I hadn't found you, you'd be dead." His gaze lingered on Rocky's scarred coat, his wary eyes. "But you fought it. You wanted to live." Other officers peeked through the doorway. "That stray survived. He doesn't even look like a mutt." One shook his head. "There's something in his eyes, like he understands every word." Rocky stared back, silent, steady. He didn't know their language, but he knew tone. No threat, only wonder. The man reached out slowly. Rocky flinched, then stilled as the hand rested warm and firm on his head. "You're safe now. Rest." And for the first time since entering the city, Rocky let himself close his eyes. His breath eased, his body curled into the blanket. Outside, sirens and engines howled, but here in this small room there was calm. The man watched him, whispering almost to himself, "You've seen the worst of this city already. But maybe you'll see something better too." Rocky's tail gave the faintest twitch. Somewhere deep inside, a spark remained. This was not the forest, not the village, not the mountains. This was a new world filled with shadows. And yet within those shadows, a hand had reached out, not to harm but to save. And Rocky would remember that. Because this was no ending. It was the opening of another path, darker, stranger, but his all the same. Days passed at the small police station. Rocky regained his strength, his wounds closed, his steps steady again. The officers had grown fond of him. They fed him scraps from their lunches, patted his head on their way out to patrol, and joked that he was smarter than half the rookies. But it was the young officer, the same man who had carried him from the alley, who cared for him most. He gave Rocky clean water each morning, let him sleep near his desk, and sometimes spoke to him late at night when the station grew quiet. "You've got something in you, boy," he would murmur, scratching behind Rocky's ears. "Like you've seen too much but still keep going. Maybe that's why I trust you." Rocky did not understand the words, but he felt the tone. Calm, steady, kind. After a few days, plans were made to send him to the local shelter. The young officer prepared the paperwork, sighing. "You'll find a home, buddy. Someone will take care of you." He clipped a leash gently to Rocky's collar, ready to walk him out. Then the phone rang, urgent, sharp. The officer froze, listening. His expression hardened. He grabbed a notepad, scribbled quickly, then slammed the receiver down. "There's a deal going down tonight," he muttered. "Big shipment. Drugs. We move now." He glanced at Rocky, still leashed, still waiting. A crooked smile tugged at his lips. Well, buddy, you've already had a run-in with this poison. How about one more night before the shelter? Want to come along? Rocky tilted his head, ears pricking. His tail gave a single thump. That's what I thought, the officer chuckled. Let's go. The night was heavy with humidity, clouds smothering the moon. At the city's edge stood an abandoned warehouse, its windows broken, its walls streaked with rust. Outside, trucks idled their engines, low headlights off. Men in dark coats moved in and out carrying boxes. From the cover of shadows, the officers watched. Radios crackled softly, orders whispered. The young officer crouched beside Rocky, hand resting on his fur. Stay close. No barking unless I tell you. Rocky's eyes fixed on the warehouse. He could smell it already, the bitter sting of chemicals, the same stench that had nearly killed him. His body stiffened, a growl rumbling low in his chest. The command came. Move in. Lights flared, voices thundered. Police, drop everything. Chaos erupted. Men shouted, boxes crashed, feet pounded on concrete. Some bolted for the doors, others grabbed pipes and bats, desperate to fight. The young officer charged forward. Rocky stayed at his side. One man swung a metal rod, aiming for the officer's back. Rocky launched himself like a shadow teeth, sinking deep into the man's arm. The weapon clattered to the floor as the man screamed. Good boy, the officer shouted, yanking Rocky free. They pressed on. Inside the warehouse was a storm. Boxes stacked high, bags split open, white powder clouded the air. Men scrambled in every direction, pursued by officers with raised voices and flashing lights. A gunshot split the noise, sharp and deafening. The young officer ducked behind a crate, Rocky pressed tight against his leg. The shooter bolted for the back door, clutching a bag. Not this time, the officer muttered, sprinting after him. Rocky followed, paws slipping on the dusty floor. The man burst into the alley, running hard, but Rocky was faster. He lunged, jaws locking on the man's pant leg. They tumbled the bag, spilling across the ground. The officer was there in seconds, pinning the suspect, cuffs snapping shut. Breathless, he dropped to his knees beside Rocky, gripping his scruff. You did it. Couldn't have done this without you. By dawn, trucks hauled the suspects away. The warehouse stood empty, save for the young officer and Rocky amid the ruins. The officer crouched, meeting Rocky's tired, dark eyes. You're not just some stray. You're a partner. You fought beside me. Saved me more than once tonight. The word struck something deep inside Rocky. For once, he was not alone. He was trusted, respected. Belonging wrapped around him like the warmth of a fire. Yet even as the moment settled, his gaze drifted to the horizon where dawn painted the sky in gold. His body ached from battle, but his spirit stirred restlessly. He had helped here, yes, but his road was not finished. Beyond the city, beyond the smoke and sirens, something still called. The truth of his blood, the family he had never known. The officer rose, brushing dust from his hands. His voice softened. They'll still want to send you to a shelter. But part of me knows you belong elsewhere. Not behind bars, not in a kennel. Wherever you go, buddy, you'll always be a hero to me. Rocky blinked, tail swaying faintly. He did not know the words, but he felt them heavy and true. Together they walked into the morning, their shadows stretching long across the broken pavement. Rocky had fought in the wild, braved fire, defended the weak, and now faced the darkest corners of men's greed. But his paws still longed for the road, and his heart still longed for the truth. He was no longer just a stray. He was a warrior, a guardian, a wanderer. And somewhere ahead the horizon waited. The decision had been made. By evening, Rocky would be sent to the shelter. The paperwork was signed, the calls complete, and the young officer who had cared for him knew there was nothing left to change. Still, he clipped the leash gently to Rocky's collar and whispered, "Come on, buddy. One last walk. One last patrol." The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The city pulsed with restless life, horns blared, vendors shouted, children's laughter echoed between doorways. Rocky walked close beside the officer, pause, steady, his dark eyes sweeping every corner with the vigilance of a soldier who could not stop watching. At a wide intersection, a young woman stepped into the crosswalk. She moved slowly, both hands pressed against her round belly, her face pale from the weight she carried. The officer noticed and murmured under his breath, She's carrying more than herself. People ought to slow down here." The words had barely left his lips when the roar of an engine tore through the air. A motorcycle came screaming around the bend, its headlight cutting a harsh line through the twilight. The rider leaned forward recklessly, speed out of control, the back tire fishtailing as he gunned straight toward the crosswalk. "Stop!" the officer shouted, lunging forward. But the woman froze, paralyzed by fear. Rocky didn't hesitate. His body coiled, then exploded forward with terrifying force. The leash burned through the officer's hand as Rocky hurled himself into the street. His growl split the night. He struck the front wheel with his shoulder jaws snapping at the rubber. Metal screamed. Sparks burst across the pavement. The motorcycle skidded sideways, a spray of fire scattering behind it. The rider's curse turned into a scream as he flew from the bike, slamming into the street. The woman stumbled backward, fell hard to the ground, her hands clamped around her belly. A cry tore from her lips. Blood spread quickly across her dress. "Oh God, no!" The officer gasped. He pulled Rocky back and rushed to her side. "Someone call an ambulance." Voices rose in panic. People rushed from sidewalks. Phones lit up the night. A man threw himself into the street to stop traffic, waving at cars. Another knelt beside the fallen woman, pressing cloth into her shaking hands. "The baby," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "The baby is coming." Rocky staggered up his shoulder, torn and bleeding from the impact, but he stood firm, eyes fixed on her body, tense lips curled at the wreck still sparking nearby. Sirens wailed, drawing closer. Rocky's ears twitched, chest heaving as ambulance lights cut through the chaos. Medics leapt out, lifting the woman with urgent hands. The officer held Rocky back, whispering, "Easy, buddy. Easy now." But Rocky strained toward her, his body leaning as if only the leash kept him from climbing into the ambulance. And then it came. From the open doors above the shouts of medics and the cry of sirens, another sound pierced the night. The cry of a newborn. Thin, trembling, yet fierce enough to rise above every voice, every engine, every sound of the city. Rocky froze. His eyes widened, ears upright, his entire body stiff. The sound struck deeper than wounds, deeper than hunger, deeper even than fire. It reached into the hollow place carved long ago, the day he was abandoned, left to face the cold alone. It was the sound of life, the sound of beginnings, the sound he had never known from his own mother. The officer knelt beside him, hand resting on Rocky's trembling back. His voice was rough with awe. "You hear that, buddy? That's life being born. You gave them this chance." Rocky's breath came heavy, chest rising and falling. His eyes locked on the flashing lights, his ears still echoing with that cry. His tail flicked once against the pavement, faint but certain. The ambulance pulled away, red lights fading into the distance, siren echoing down the streets. Rocky stood watching long after the crowd had gone, long after the officer rose to his feet. Inside him, the newborn's cry burned like fire. It was not just another rescue. It was a reminder. The city roared around him, neon buzzing engines, rattling voices rising. But Rocky heard only that sound repeating again and again, calling him forward. He would remember it. He would carry it with him. Because somewhere out there beyond the city and the mountains, beyond fire and shadow, waited the truth he still sought. The road stretched wide and endless, and Rocky's heart surged toward it. This was not an ending. It was the sign of another beginning. The city had grown quiet. Most of the noise had drained away, leaving only the hum of distant traffic and the faint flicker of street lamps casting yellow pools of light on the damp pavement. Outside the police station, Rocky sat still, his dark eyes fixed on the horizon, as if the night itself held secrets meant only for him. The leash had been taken off. For the first time in days, he was free to sit where he pleased, but his heart was heavy. He had saved lives. He had heard the cry of a newborn, yet deep inside he knew his journey was far from over. Beside him, the night guard leaned back in his chair. He was an older man, his shoulders hunched with the weight of years, his jacket worn at the elbows. A cigarette burned low between his fingers, smoke curling upward in thin gray spirals. He glanced at Rocky and let out a dry chuckle. "Well, boy," he said softly, his voice rough but not unkind. "Looks like you and I aren't so different. No place else to go, so we sit here keeping watch in the dark." Rocky turned his head. His ears flicked at the rhythm of the man's voice. The guard sighed, his eyes drifting past the street lamp into the shadows. "My wife's been gone 10 years now. A car accident. Quick, brutal. No chance to say goodbye. His voice faltered for a moment, then steadied again. My son drives trucks for a living, long hauls state to state, always moving. I don't see him much anymore. Sometimes months pass without a word. But I tell myself as long as he's out there still alive, still rolling down those highways, I can rest easy. Rocky blinked slowly, tilting his head as if he understood. The guard rubbed his hands together for warmth, then looked down at Rocky. Strange, isn't it? Life keeps moving even when we stay in one place. You sit still long enough, you start to wonder if maybe you should have been the one on the road. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The city exhaled, the night deepened. And then Rocky's ears pricked sharply. One word from the man's story had pierced through the quiet like a spark. Truck. His body shifted, muscles tightening. He lifted his head higher, eyes gleaming in the lamplight. In his mind, images collided, roads cutting across mountains, engines rumbling through valleys, headlights glowing like beacons in the night. A thought flashed, bright and undeniable. Trucks crossed distances his paws never could. If they carried men and goods from one end of the country to the other, maybe they could also carry him closer to the family he had lost. The guard noticed the change. He chuckled, shaking his head. What's this? You look like you understood me, eyes shining like that. You got plans, boy. Rocky let out a small bark, low and brief. His tail tapped once against the concrete. The guard laughed again, this time with a hint of wonder. Well, I'll be. Maybe you do. Maybe you're meant to go farther than this station, farther than these streets. Rocky looked toward the gates of the station. Beyond them, trucks rumbled past from time to time, engines growling, headlights sweeping across the road. He watched them with a new hunger, a fire lit deep behind his eyes. The guard leaned back, his cigarette now just a stub. His voice drifted softer, almost as though speaking to himself. Funny thing about the road. It's lonely, sure. Dangerous, too. But it'll take you places you never dreamed of. My boy tells me about deserts, mountains, cities bigger than this one. Says the highway feels endless. Maybe that's what you need, eh? Endless miles to chase whatever it is you're searching for. Rocky shifted closer, pressing his body against the man's boots. The guard reached down, his old hand brushing through Rocky's rough fur. For the first time that night, Rocky closed his eyes and leaned into the touch. You're a strange one, the guard whispered. Brave, stubborn, restless. Maybe the world's got bigger plans for you than a kennel. The street grew quieter still. A truck rumbled past, its tires hissing on the wet asphalt, the trailer groaning under its weight. Rocky's eyes snapped open. He watched it vanish down the road, the red taillights shrinking into pinpricks until they were gone. And in that instant, something clicked inside him. This was the path. The road itself was calling. If he followed the trucks, if he tracked the men who lived their lives on the highway, perhaps he could find his own story. Perhaps he could find the truth of his blood, his parents, the family that had been stolen from him. The guard gave a tired smile, unaware of the storm gathering in Rocky's heart. Get some rest, buddy. Tomorrow's another day. But Rocky did not rest. He sat tall, ears alert, eyes burning with resolve. The night stretched long and quiet, but Rocky's mind was racing. He had heard the cry of a newborn, felt the fire of saving lives, and now the story of an old man had shown him a direction. The road was waiting, and when morning came, Rocky would be ready. Dawn broke over the city, pale light spilling across rooftops, chasing away the last traces of night. The streets glistened with dew lamps flickering before fading into silence. At the gate of the police station, Rocky sat for a moment, then rose. Without a sound, he stepped forward, leaving behind the narrow alleys, the cramped houses, and the people who had shown him kindness. Ahead stretched something vast, something he had never faced so closely before. The highway. It was a river of steel and thunder. Tractor trailers, delivery trucks, long-haul rigs all roared past in an endless line. Their engines growled like giants, their wheels spinning so fast the ground seemed to tremble. Every gust of wind whipped Rocky's fur, filling his nose with the sharp sting of burning rubber and diesel. He froze at the edge of the road, tail, stiff ears pricked. Each truck that screamed past split the air open with sound and light machines so massive they dwarfed his small frame. His heart pounded, paws quivered, but his eyes stayed locked forward. Across the lanes he saw it. A truck pulled onto the shoulder, one rear tire blown. A man in greasy coveralls crouched by the wheel tools scattered on the pavement. The cab door hung open, engine ticking faintly as it cooled. Rocky's chest rose and fell in sharp, fast breaths. That truck was more than metal and wheels. It was a chance, a doorway to the road beyond the very road that stretched across mountains and valleys, through towns and forests. If he could reach it, his journey could begin anew. But between him and that truck lay a storm of danger. He paced back a few steps, muscles taut beneath his fur. Horns blared. Diesel smoke scorched his nose. Every nerve in his body was strung tight as a bowstring. A gap opened, just a heartbeat of silence. Rocky lunged. His paws struck hot asphalt claws, scraping for grip. Wind slammed into him as another rig thundered past, inches behind, nearly tossing him sideways. He pushed harder, faster, every stride pulling him deeper into the storm. The ground shook. Headlights flared. A horn bellowed so loud it rattled his ribs. A massive truck bore down its chrome grille, blazing like a wall of doom. Rocky leapt. For a split second his body hung in the air. Paws stretched, the roar of engines filling his ears. He landed hard, rolled across the grit, then sprang upright again, fur streaked with dirt but eyes burning with fire. The driver of the stopped truck gasped, dropping his wrench. God almighty, I've never seen a dog do that. Another blast of a horn shook the air as a container truck roared past, but Rocky was clear now, paws striking the gravel shoulder. He stumbled once, caught himself chest heaving, breath ragged. The driver stared wide-eyed. You're either crazy or you're the bravest thing on four legs. Rocky stood tall, ears high, gaze locked on the truck. He wasn't just crossing a road, he was crossing into something larger, something greater than himself. The driver shook his head, still muttering under his breath. Whatever you're after, I hope you find it. Rocky's heart hammered, but fear had already faded. The trucks no longer seemed like monsters. They were doors that carried the world beyond. And now he had stepped to the threshold. For a long moment he stood there, fur ruffled by the passing wind, his dark eyes reflecting the rising sun. Before him stretched the road, endless, dangerous, alive. And in that quiet fire of morning, Rocky understood. This was no longer survival. This was destiny. And the road had claimed him. The highway still roared behind him, trucks screaming past in an endless stream, horns splitting the morning like thunder. Dust clung to Rocky's fur. His breath came fast, but he had made it. He had crossed the storm of steel and wheels, and somehow survived. Destiny had chosen him, but it wasn't finished testing him yet. Ahead, the same truck he had glimpsed before loomed on the shoulder, its cab door open, one tire blown flat. A man in his late 50s, grease on his hands and weariness in his face, crouched low, fighting with stubborn bolts, muttering curses under his breath. When he glanced up, his eyes froze. Just a few yards away, a dog stood watching. Rocky's legs still trembled from the sprint, but his eyes glowed steady. His tail flicked once, then stilled. He didn't growl. He didn't flee. He simply stood, gaze sharp, as though he were measuring the man. "Well, I'll be damned," the driver muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "You ran across all that madness just to get here." Rocky edged closer, chest rising and falling, then stopped. Something in the air stung his nose. Bitter. Wrong. He circled the truck slowly, paws crunching gravel, and then halted. Beneath the chassis, a dark line spread across the pavement, oil dripping fast. A sudden bark ripped from his chest, sharp and urgent. The man flinched. "What the hell, quiet down, boy, I've got enough trouble already." But Rocky barked again, louder this time, claws scraping the asphalt as he pointed his muzzle toward the growing stain. Frowning, the driver bent to look. A second later, his face went pale. "Son of a..." He shot upright, running a hand through his graying hair. "That's a leak. If I'd rolled this rig forward, I could have cooked the engine. Maybe lit the whole damn thing on fire." His gaze dropped back to Rocky, the astonishment in his eyes softening into something deeper. You caught that astray mutt and you just saved me a fortune. Maybe more than that." Rocky sat back on his haunches, silent, waiting. The driver chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Hell, you're sharper than half the rookies I've trained. Smarter, too." He hesitated, then slapped the metal step leading to the cab. "Come on, boy. You want the road, you've earned it." Rocky tilted his head. The highway thundered behind him, but his eyes locked on that open door. Slowly he placed one paw on the step, then another. For a heartbeat he paused, glancing at the man. The driver gave a tired grin. "That's it. From now on you ride with me. Long miles ahead, but something tells me you can handle it." With a leap, Rocky climbed into the cab, settling onto the mat. His chest still heaved, but his eyes blazed with life, fixed on the windshield and the horizon beyond. The man patched the leak, swapped the tire, then climbed behind the wheel. The engine rumbled back to life, the rig shuddering forward. He looked down at Rocky, who sat upright like a soldier awaiting orders. "Guess it's just you and me now, buddy. Two wanderers, nothing but the road ahead." Rocky's tail thumped once against the floor. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the meaning: trust, acceptance, a chance. Outside, the dawn lifted into day, the highway stretched wide and endless. For the first time, the open road wasn't just survival, it was freedom.